I grew up homeless on the streets of Southern California. You would say that I was through and through a narcissist. So I was getting into contracting and I was making a lot of money, which was not great for me. I want to be clear too, your rock bottom is not, my rock bottom is not going to appear. You have to do the work. Just get up and write.
Hello, and welcome to Awake at the Wheel. So for our regular listeners, you may have noted that recently we've been focusing quite a bit on men's mental health. And both for our clinical practices, we have been noting a lot of the needs of men not necessarily being addressed or approached in our field in general. So to further this conversation, we're going to be meeting today with Eric Ruth. So Eric is the founder of the Honesty Experiment, which is a movement that is dedicated to helping people to transform their lives through radical self-honesty as well as journaling. He is a devoted family man, an attorney, author, and entrepreneur, and he's from Detroit, Michigan. Eric has a remarkable story, and I don't think that I can quite capture it in this brief introduction. So, Eric, hello and welcome. And can you share a bit with our audience about yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. The nickel tour of me is still pretty extensive, but I'll try to get through it pretty quick. So for 7 years of my life, I grew up homeless on the streets of Southern California in Orange County. My mother was a 19-year-old heroin-addicted prostitute. She had me. And then for the next 7 years, I just kind of ran around with her, living in motels, underpasses. And then at 7, I ran away. I went into the system with my 2-year-old sister at that point. And then we were in and out of the system for a couple of years. And then I was essentially adopted by my last foster family and spent the rest of my time with them. They were guardians, or I didn't really get adopted. They were just guardians. And during that time, I played kind of high-level sports. Was never in therapy. I think make sure that's clear. Going through the system from age 7 until I aged out at 18. I had at one point for a couple months a weekly kind of check-in counseling appointment, but it's more for to make sure there was no abuse going on, because there had been some abuse in the home, but never did any sort of counseling, any sort of therapy. Get into the military, had a dream of becoming a SEAL, got into the SEAL pipeline, but the entire time I was lying about my eyesight, so I got kicked out. Almost got threatened with a court-martial, so you don't lie in that realm of those folks. And then for the next decade after I got out of the military, I just floundered. I had no idea what I wanted to do, lacked purpose. Went through 2 marriages. Every relationship I had was absolutely toxic. If you talk to any of my past partners, you would say that I was through and through a narcissist. Everything I did was driven by selfish desires and chasing pleasure and comfort. And unfortunately for me, this was about 2005, 2006, and I was getting into contracting, and I was making a lot of money, which was not great for me. And I was in Southern California, and I was surrounded by people that just wanted to party. And that's what I did. And it nearly drove me into the ground and got me to the point where I was self-isolating. I got to, like I said, I was over 330 pounds is where I'm estimating I was. You get to that big and you stop taking pictures and you stop weighing yourself. I'm guessing that's where I was at. And got suicidal. And I tried one night to end it all, and it didn't work out. I was too drunk to do anything. The next day I said, okay, let's try to figure out what's going on. And I started searching around the interwebs. And I actually ended up in a Reddit forum for veterans, and I wrote a book by a guy named Eric Greitens. Shed light like around Mr. Greitens. He's got a little bit of a reputation. It isn't as shiny as I would hope it would be. But he wrote a book called Resilience, and the book was a great book for me. It was formulated on a conversation between him and some other veterans that were having some PTSD issues. And it was the conversation was formed around philosophy. And I am somebody that religion I had been in and out with and had a kind of a sticky relationship with, and that was my moral compass. But this philosophy really hit home. It was hard hitting, and so I delved into it. I kind of did what I call my graduate level study of philosophy for a good year. Just read every source material from Epictetus. I remember going back to Socrates and Zeno and things like that. But I read every single thing I could find online, and then I started journaling. I realized that there was a lot of wisdom that I was hearing and understanding, But if I was going to call myself a philosopher or a stoic or a transformed person, it was journaling. And I'll say this from the get-go. You're going to hear me talk a lot about stoicism and virtue ethics. I am not trying to sell anybody on stoicism. I tried it before 5 minutes. It's not a sexy concept. It is a very hard way of living. I tell everybody else in Michigan, the water's freezing cold, but I get up every morning and take a very, very cold shower. I'm walking pneumonia, I'm getting up doing these things. But the one thing I found inside this practice was journaling. That was the first time in my life that I was able to shed all of those conditionings and identities that I've been living with and the self-deception that I've been telling myself, the way that I talk to myself in my head. It was the very first time seeing those words on paper that changed it. It was an instant transformation for me. Stoicism and recognizing that self-awareness was one, but then it was a second one inside this process of journaling. And then for me, it was cemented with my wife. I watched my wife. My wife she never really wanted to be a parent. I convinced her to have a child. But after her son was born, I watched her go through postpartum. And what happened was I watched her in my journaling, actually, this is where I saw this. I started to see her exhibit signs that I had seen from hookers when I was a kid. Be around hookers, spend enough time around prostitutes, you realize they start to self-create happiness, control what they can control, draw pictures, they put on makeup, they dress up when they can. And my wife started doing these things during COVID. She was dressing up, putting on makeup in the middle of the week with nowhere to go. We're like, we got some issues here. Up until that point, I'd been kind of a covert stoic. You know anything about stoicism, and somebody calls themselves a stoic, you better raise an eye and say, hey, why are you telling me this? This is a covert philosophy. You don't advertise the good you're doing, you just do it. So up until that point, I hadn't told her anything. I said, hey, you need to look at journaling. I'm not trying to tell you to be a stoic, but you need to go write your feelings out. Go talk to your therapist about this. So she did, and she talked, and we had more conversations about our own journaling, and we kind of developed a couples meeting each week. And then we started doing almost what I consider daily devotional meetings at night. We would sit down at night and tear apart our journals and our days and figure out what objectives we're trying to meet, hold each other accountable. And then we started sharing our journals in a Google document each day. And we became like this little power couple of stoicism. And I started going around to Metro Detroit and saying, hey guys, I found a system that works for me. Is what I found out inside the criminal sphere here in Detroit. Women are taken care of pretty well. Not as well as we want to, certainly. Any women that's coming that's system impacted, coming out of the system, they have a mountain of issues and challenges they face. But it's getting better. But for men in Detroit, there wasn't much, especially for men that have no safety nets. So worked with the Salvation Army, some recovery, parole offices. They said, what can we do for these men that don't have moral compasses, especially the ones that are absolutely checked out of religion? What do we do with these guys? And so I started these weekly meetings, and we'd go and we'd talk, and we'd have honest conversations about what we're scared of, what we don't want to do, where we don't want to go, and why we're doing this every day. And part of it became this journaling process, and I realized that I didn't have any prompts for them. I was showing up, and I'm just like, write about your feelings. And they're like, okay, how do you do that? How do you journal? Because I know when I started, it was just like a diary. It was terrible. So I came up with a 6-week program, and it was terrible. It was awful, and it was hastily thrown together, but it worked for me, getting the idea. And it also got the idea in me that, hey, you need to make this an actual thing. So what I did is I kind of did a deep delve into what I did in my own process and kind of figured out what I had done in a very long, probably 2-year period to transform myself. And I comprised it into this book that I came up with. This is my journaling program, which is the Goodly Dozen. And that's what I started giving to these people. Say, hey, follow this. This is how I did it. I took these 12 areas of my life and just audited stoicism and virtue up against it and say, hey, if you're moving your body inside this realm of your life, whether it be finances, your inner circle, emotional health, physical activity, whatever it is, make sure it's good. Make sure it's virtuous. It's all you do every day. Check it. And it worked. I was like, oh my gosh, this works. Everybody I talked to, they're like, this is amazing. But it's not easy. And I realized that it needed somebody like me to show up every day and be that coach to these guys. Say, look, I can't hand you this book and say, hey, go have a nice life. You need one, I need to be a credible messenger. You need to know that I was there. I went through the stuff. I know that it works. I know it's tough. And then 2, I need to show up every day to say, hey, I'm still doing this. I'm living this my life too. I'm showing up every morning. I'm journaling. I still have struggles. I still don't want to do it. Hey, look, I missed 2 days last week too. So that's what I started doing, and it really resonated with you guys. And then what happened, it was great. And I was having a great time. And then what happened was people were like, hey, you tell your story all the time, but you have something I could read. I was like, no, I've gotten that a lot. You should write your book, your sound, your movie, your life sounding your movie kind of thing. I was like, I got to more life professionally. I was like, okay, maybe I can take a year off. So that's what I did. So I took a year off and I wrote my book. And we finished it. I finished it last summer. And then, you finish a book and then the editing process is like another writing of a book. So I did that. So then I had this book and this journal, and I'm just doing it locally here in Detroit, and start talking with some friends and people that I know in California that are, in the system over there. And I said, I got to do something with this. This is good. Everybody I talk to says, yes, 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 this is what we need. So what are we going to do with it? And I had this nonprofit that I was just going out trying to get money for books to give to these organizations. And I said, this has got to be a movement. And then I found out about, I feel bad saying this after her name. Her name's Taryn. She was an Australian woman like 10 years ago, and she had this movement for body image, especially for women. And she started a movement. She's like, hey, women, pay attention to your body. And I was like, that's it. That's all I got to do. You just start talking to people and say, hey, this is all you got to do is wake up and journal. Again, I'm going to talk a lot about Stoicism and virtue ethics in my own story, but it's just journaling. It's waking up in a very guided, what I call, deep thinking way, of being honest with yourself on paper. Just talked to a woman this morning. She does it every day and then she burns them. I said, why do you burn it? She goes, don't you worry about it. That's my process. I'm having a conversation with myself and it's honest. And that's what I've got to do. But that's what you want, right? I say, hallelujah. That's it. Of course, just do whatever you've got to do to have that honest conversation with yourself. Because for me, I recognize there's so many other people. There's so much self-deception in the identities that you accept and allow you to live because of the conditionings around you, your environment. And people say, you're going to be this today. You're okay. That's the role I'm going to fit today. And journaling is the one that says, you get to choose to be a different person if you want.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, there's so many, but there's so many directions that we can go with this. But I went through the journal yesterday in preparation for our conversation today, and I noted that a lot of it was very similar to cognitive behavioral therapy and some of the tools that we use in our practice. And I thought that was really cool to see that it's good stuff that you got in that journal. What do you find though is the difficulty, I guess, for perhaps the buy-in for men in doing that? Like, does it feel too therapy-ish for them? Does it feel honest and genuine to them? What have you noted?
It's honestly, I'm not going to talk about my feelings. That's not a manly thing to do. I'm going to be a man. And it's, you take blue collar crowds, you take street crowds, military crowds, the guys I've been around, and it's the same thing. It's like, we're going to talk about the exact same things over and over and over again. And, it's funny right now, I'm working with a lot of natural disaster companies. I like to go out and work and get out of the office. So I'm doing a lot of tree company right now. And I'm hanging out with these blue collar guys all day. And all they want to do is tell a bunch of inappropriate jokes and talk about your mom. Like, well, I'm 43 years old, still telling fat mom jokes. And not one of these conversations has any substance about what's really going on with you. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing is, all check in on each other. Every single one of them. The loyalty between these guys is unbelievable. Hey, how you doing? Need anything? Hey, I'm there for you. I'm going, no, shut up. No, you're not. You're showing up and saying, hey, I'm a text message away if you need me. But that's not like, you're not maintaining what you need to call an inner circle of really checking in on somebody because you're not opening up to them. You can't. You don't have the ability to say, this is what I really need right now. And it's just that machoism. And it's just that perpetual, that kind of what I see the toxic masculinity in America and the rest of the world when it comes to really ego, that is the one thing that I can talk about to anybody. I was the king egomaniac forever, and I lived it. I know exactly what your mindset is when you're inside of that, and understanding mine. And I go, hey, so these guys, I go, let's not look at it like it's a bad thing. You got a monster ego right now. Let's talk about why it exists. Okay, it's not a bad thing. My ego exists because I was there to protect my happiness. The problem is protecting our happiness is way off kilter. We don't understand what happiness is, so we're going to protect all of this stuff that doesn't need to be touched, rather than protecting what we should, which is the community around us, and protecting our reputation of, giving our efforts to others. And instead, they protect what they think is happiness, which is the short-term pleasure, which is going after the comforts in life rather than the hard work.
Absolutely. So to go back to your experience and your story, I imagine that I'm sure that a lot of the work that you've done and what you're contributing now to others was largely informed by the trauma that you went through. But in your view, where does trauma end and motivation begin? Because I think that sometimes people will kind of live in that victimhood of what happened to them rather than turning it into something positive. And it can be indeed very character building. So what was your experience, or what are your thoughts surrounding that?
So my experience was unfortunately one of you reach a breaking point. It's always an external thing that causes something to change. And it's not just a self-awareness. It's always something I would have loved it to be a conversation that changed my perspective. I would have loved for it to be a book when I was younger or a mentorship. Unfortunately for me, it was my mortality. Because you get to the point where you get so deep into ideation and in conversation about suicide. And then when you get to the point where you give up, that ledge is a deep, dark place for somebody to get to. And the way that I landed on it was you have to, well, I'm not going to say you have to, but I know I looked around and go, okay, shit, this isn't something is not right here. Like, this isn't how it's supposed to happen. Not even in this situation was supposed to happen. Like, what am I going to do with this? And then you're sober in a moment of that chaos and you go, okay, I don't want to do this again. And in going through this process, that was the first thing I go, hey, listen, if you're going to try to sell this to anybody and have this movement, gain any credible traction, you need to be honest with this and say, look, for anybody out there that's struggling, like, this is going to be a very, very difficult, hard sell for me, because I recognize that you're not going to come to me voluntarily until you're at the bottom of that barrel. I tell a story at the beginning of the Good Dozen that you're at the bottom of that hole because I've been there. And I've tried to sell this I live in Milford, Michigan. It's the whitest suburb in Detroit. Everybody's got money around here. I've given it to everybody. Everybody's like, it's a nice little book, Eric. This isn't going to really. You have no idea what this means to be at this point in your life and have this kind of guidance thrown in front of you. But this is guidance that nobody's going to reach out for. This is stuff that has to be shoved down your throat when you realize that maybe you don't have the self-awareness to know you're down there. And I wish I could say that there is a recipe for people at any point in life, be them teenagers or 20s, 30s, or 40s, where you can say, listen to this combination of words, and it's going to provide that self-awareness for you. I'm going to give you like a hypnotist tool, like Harry Potter's wand. You're going to go, okay, I get it now. I understand what I have to do. And again, it's a horse to water kind of analogy, and I haven't found that recipe yet. But what I'm hopeful of is that my story can be a conduit to that. That somebody somewhere can go, oh shit, okay, I see that I don't want to go down that path. I saw the path that Eric went down. He does a pretty good job of clearly showing not only what he did, but why he did it. And it resonates with me. I see that I've got some selfish tendencies there. Those things that, I talk about, if you're somebody that has a lot of people around you saying, you're really good, you just don't live up to your tendencies, or you can be a little less selfish, or this and that. Pay attention to that. Pay attention to that. Go get some mentorship now. Go get some therapy now. Start writing now. If I can, again, anybody that does this stuff, I can change one person. That's the reason we do it. And I look at the tools and resources I had around me as a teenager in the 1990s in a foster care system, and as somebody in my 20s in the military in the early 2000s, and then going through my 20s in 20 teens. I didn't have this resource. I didn't have somebody, a voice that I could hear that was a man going, sit down, let's talk about our feelings right now. Honestly, really honest. Let's talk about the hot chick that comes in every day. You can't pull your distractions off. Let's talk about the stuff that's really bugging you. Let's talk about the money issues you can't get out of your head. Let's talk about the stuff that is really bugging you. And I think that by being me and kind of sacrificing really the skeletons in my closet in this book, that's what I'm hoping I can do, is say, guys, look, I did it for you. Almost like and like I sell my point as Jesus, but like, hey, I'm doing it for you here, man. I burned all the bridges out there. I don't have anything else to worry about anymore. Anybody coming after me, just take the lessons that I learned from what I went through and then transform that. And I'm hoping that does it. But to go back to the issue question, I don't think there's a way that, unless you really get to the bottom of this, anybody's going to take notice and really want to do it.
Yeah. So for now, I have one more question before I turn it over to Oren. So you're talking that Stoicism influenced a lot of your work. I also read in your book that Einstein and the Beatles influenced you a lot. So can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. So I've always been fascinated with greatness. I've always really been attracted to humans that have overcome adversity in ways that provided something for humanity, not just for themselves. I've always been turned off by people that are just rich and held on to their money, right? So I had never really learned much about the Beatles. Growing up in Southern California, I was a punk guy. I listened to a lot of punk music and loud, yelling music. And I think a friend of mine turned me on to the Beatles. So I go, listen, this is good music. And then I listened to or watched the documentary. It's like, oh, okay, these guys aren't just a pop band that got famous because there was a vacuum in pop music. They were really good artists. So I started studying them a little bit, and I realized their process was interesting. The fact that they really dedicated themselves to their art. And I looked past the fame and the admiration that people give them and really looked at how the process in which they created that art. Because I recognized that I had ideas in my head and I could never get them out in a way. They never manifested. I would start things and stop things, start things and stop things. And so I saw their process of when they stopped touring. I said, well, this is the type of art that we want to create. We want to dedicate ourselves 100% to our work. And that was instrumental to me to realizing you got to shed all the other kind of things you're going through in life and be hyper focused on what you're doing. And that was me writing my book. And that was when I got rid of, I hate to say it, but I got rid of friends. I got rid of hobbies. I got rid of bad habits. My budget is streamlined like no other. But it was the joy that I found inside that process was like no other. And then Einstein, again, another great human being, but he gave me his visual representation. As a lawyer, I recognize that words are very limiting. And believe it or not, especially in the English language, as vast as our language is, it is very limiting in expressing ideas. And I had for a long time tried to understand life and understand the meaning of life, and going through studies in theology and reading pretty much every self-help book out there, trying to really understand what I saw life to be. And I finally was able to do that in an analogy of life being a river. I talk about it in the Good Lesson. I see the life as being kind of a lazy river. I steal it from, I feel I'm terrible, I can't remember their names, but the Whole Grain Child. And they use the example of the river of chaos, or sorry, the bank of chaos and the bank of rigidity, having those two things. And that really resonated with me. I understood going through life like that, almost like I'm bipolar fashion either side. I said, I recognize that the balance of life was created by not necessarily staying in the middle of that, but not staying either along too bank. Because in my life, in the work hard, play hard mentality that civilization's become, it's time you have to be two different people. Like I recognize, like I remember coming home from work, be like, I feel like I'm two different people here. Like because I want to have fun over here, but when I work, I want to be, deep into my work here. So that's why I come up with the analogy that life is like a river, and it makes sense to me, especially when it comes to anxiety. And I think this is the one thing I can sell this to everybody who comes to journaling, especially when I talk to people with teenagers now, is anxiety is nothing more than if you're on a river and you're floating up and you know there's a waterfall 2 miles ahead and you start paddling for it now, you look crazy. That's anxiety. You're worrying about problems that aren't here yet. Know they're there. That's fine, but go about your day and then you deal with them when you have. So that's where I got the Einstein and Beatles thing.
Okay. I love that analogy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm also particularly keen to water-based analogies, so I like that. And there's so much in what you've said today, also in your books, to touch upon. So I'm just going to randomly throw a few out there. Okay. So first of all, let's go with the kind of the fundamental, because you talked a number of times about the power of journaling. And I mean, there's different types. First one is just, as you say, just like diary writing, just putting your thoughts out there. There is something different about communicating, and it's different with your handwriting versus typing. It's all like there are differences. But in your honesty experiment, book or manual, it's not just journaling randomly. It's very structured, and there are very, a number of points that you're really focusing on. So, I mean, it'd be too long. We can't go through every single point because it's quite a few. But if someone was saying, okay, well, what's special about your journaling? Why is it so powerful? How would you summarize it to sell it?
Sure. It's this is the platform you need to land on when you come out of that hole. If you get to a point in your life where you can't figure things out and it seems too chaotic and you really need to do an audit of your life, this is it. This is the program. Quick story, interesting. Every Sunday morning I do my show, and I was looking around this morning. My first meeting, nobody showed up, and what's going on here? And I noticed that Church of Scientology had a meeting, and they had like 175 people there. And gosh, they're getting so much traction. And it's because they do this audit program, right? They do an audit of your lives where you have to go through every area of your life and audit it. And it's almost like I stole that program from them. And this is why it's so important for people that are coming out of that hole, because you have to do that. You got to look at every area of your life to make sure there's no holes in it. So when you're talking about your finances, your everything's connected, right? It's like the butterfly effect, and everything's connected. Your finances, your emotional health, your physical health, your inner circle, time management, all of those areas of life that I picked out, that I said these are the areas you need to be best in. And again, it's really geared towards those folks that need to do that. But here's the thing that I love about it is, after you do it once, you keep doing it, and that becomes your maintenance cycle. I've had ideas of changing these prompts, but for me, I've done these. These are the same prompts I've used for I think 4 years now, and this is how I check in on myself every day. Now, I want to also be clear: I have like 3 different journals in the morning. I don't just have this one. I have this one that I maintain as like my virtue check-in audit journal. I have one specifically for my family. I have a 5-year-old, and I call him my little emotional terrorist. easy alone that really brings me a lot of frustration. So I have one specifically for my family, and then I have one right now for my professional life. And so I maintain that, just like Ben Franklin did with his virtue journal, over and over and over again, trying to perfect those areas of life. The one thing I can't sell inside Stoicism the hardest is I am a man of excellence. Everything I do is try to be the best version of me. And it's difficult to wake up every day and just do an incremental improvement on what you did the day before. And that journal is how I keep track of it. It's the best system I found in the evening review, the way I do the number system, to keep track of where I'm slipping and where I'm not. And so that's perfectly how I use it now. And I think that's how I can scale it up and sell to people is, again, coming out of that hole, you use this the first time, and that sets you up beautifully for having that foundation, figuring out not only where you're best at, but where you need to improve quickly. And then you maintain it going forward.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And again, just because of time, we won't have a chance to go into like the specifics of the journal. You sort of kind of laid out the value. And you mentioned, I know in your book, I think it was also the honesty experiment where you do have the story about the hole and the friend jumping in and saying, I've been there before. So the hole, or when it comes to addictions, like Malini and I have both worked with many addicts, and I use addiction metaphors all the time with a few of them. One is, you talk about the hole. The other, parlance is rock bottom. So I want to ask you, okay, do you believe, and again, I don't apply this only to addiction. I apply this to any time where someone's feeling despondent, lost, just deep in a hole. But I say it's either that you have to hit rock bottom, or, and this part I want to ask you, whether someone can truly start the recovery, start the path toward redemption if they haven't hit rock bottom, but they've gone down pretty far and they can see it and they don't want to have to get there in order to turn themselves around. I believe that you don't have to fully hit it. Again, seeing it, understanding what could come can propel people, upward. So I'm wondering if that's your experience as well.
My experience is unfortunately no. It was impossible for me to have self-awareness.
I'm sorry. You had hit rock bottom. You were at the edge. You were right.
Yeah, I was somebody that had to hit. I was somebody that had to hit rock bottom. But I will say this: I haven't seen it that way. I haven't seen that always play out. I've seen people that had support system around them, not people yelling at them, going, "Hey, dummy, wake up!" And again, I think if you have a good support group around you and enough people saying, "Sit down, we're going to tie you to this chair until you become aware of this." That's how it can work. A lot, sometimes, not a lot, but my experience has been, you got to find it. You have to, and here's what I tell people: you got to viscerally feel it. You have to know what it feels like, because you can talk about things, and talking about things is fun, and it's all theory. But until you've been there and you've had the panic attacks, and you know what your body feels like to lay awake for 4 straight days, you just don't know. You don't understand what it is to call out for help and expect and need somebody to say, "Okay, I'm here." And that was it for me when I called out for help to the interwebs, and I saw that book, and that was it. That was what I needed. And I wish there was a combination of words you tell anybody to say, "Hey, stop this and change your direction right now on your own." But I don't think. I think it's just everybody's got their breaking point. Everybody takes as much as they can take before they say, "I'm going to change this because I'm not happy. I'm tired of this life." And I think that's it. Is how much you can take before you become self-aware on your own. But you can certainly, if you're detached from a situation, looking at somebody spiral out of control, I would imagine there are plenty of things you can do to, interject and say, I'm going to make you self-aware. I'm going to, hopefully bring those combinations of words that's going to have you pull yourself out of it. But for me, I just had to feel it.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that's what I'm saying. But experience, I meant as far as working with other people, trying to, compel people to turn their lives around. From what you're saying, again, it sounds like you're saying that, for some people, they do have to hit that rock bottom. Even the panic attacks, even being out for days, even, having lost so much doesn't necessarily have to equate with rock bottom. There can be more, like I've seen people hit rock bottom where, again, as you're saying, like at the edge, we're saying, ending my life right now seems like the best solution. And being one step away from doing that, to me, that is really rock bottom, or having lost everything. I just want people to have hope that, you can get to a point that's quite dire, but doesn't have to be, at the edge of the world type to be able to turn around.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I want to make that clear too, that you certainly, and I want to be clear too, your rock bottom is not, my rock bottom wasn't that bad. Let's be clear about it. Rock bottom for a lot of people is not that bad at all. And rock bottom for you better be when you start thinking about that, right? That's your rock bottom. Go get answers right then and there. Like, look at my story. Don't go any further. But yeah, you're absolutely right that if you don't need to get to rock bottom before you can change your behavior and pull yourself into happiness. This is what I tell people. The moment you walk around and you feel sad, go get help. Like, don't like go get help. Like, because I can sit here now as a stoic and go, oh my gosh, this world is beautiful. I am sober. I am great. I have a 5-year-old who's an emotional terrorist, but still life is amazing. I live in Michigan. We've been in like the worst cold spell for it. Still, life is amazing. The moment that I wake up and I'm not happy, I'm calling my therapist. I'm calling my wife. I'm going to my journal. I'm doing everything because something's not right. And I'm telling everybody in the world, it is not normal to not feel happy and not feel fulfilled. But here's the recipe. It's not just going to happen. You're not going to wake up and that's just not going to appear. You have to do the work. And I'm here to tell you, go talk to these experts, talk to everybody. The work is not hard. It's about being in touch with who you are, what you want to do, and have that conversation with yourself. But that it's so hard to talk to people because it's so subjective, right? Like breaking points and what they're going to do and the happiness. And I wish, again, my mom just everybody journal. Everybody, I promise you're all going to be happy. Just journal.
Right. Okay.
So, Oren, can I jump in with a couple of questions?
Of course, yeah.
So I want to talk a bit more about masculinity and stoicism. And I work with a lot of males, a lot of first responders, and stoicism is something that's come up as a general concept. Like you said, it is really difficult to live by as a rule, but I think the general concept is great. However, there's also, you mentioned earlier, toxic masculinity, and I think that toxic masculinity is being confused with masculinity in general. Can you talk about how stoicism and masculinity maybe go hand in hand in terms of promoting healthy masculinity?
Yeah, absolutely. So live according to nature. It's a Stoics creed, right? And I will say this: I'm probably as progressive as they come. I'm a little bit of a dichotomy. I know I look like I'm a right-wing gun nut, and I'm a veteran, but I'm pretty progressive. So I have a lot of conversations with men about, transgender athletes, and men are supposed to be doing this, and a man's man, and what they're supposed to do, and women get in the kitchen, and all these gender roles. And I say, I don't need to know any of that. Let's just go to our nature. What are you supposed to do? Let's look at what a nuclear family and humans are supposed to do and what we're supposed to do and how we work together. I can tell you this. I don't know what a perfect society is supposed to look like, but I know the ones that look best is when you have a nuclear family raising children. And when you have a man in a house that is doing things that a man in a house are supposed to do, that works well. And the things a man in the house do, what does that entail? That means one, let's look at Maslow's hierarchy and then all the levels of security you need. And if you are being the man that you need to be, you're doing your job the best you can. That means number one, you're being a spouse. So what does the best spouse look like? What is the best version of you being a spouse? You're going to check in on your spouse. You're going to know what's going on with them. You're going to support them with all of their endeavors and what they want to do and make sure you're giving your efforts to them, right? And that's a conversation that will last 14 weeks with most men. And then it's being the best father. Stepping back to a second as far as the toxic masculinity with men in relationships, I think that in themselves and kind of gender roles, I had a problem with that in my own life and my wife and gender roles and how we're supposed to do these things. But I feel like I'm walking myself in a corner with toxic masculinity and stoicism because it's so hard to talk about. I have to live according to what I feel is the biggest advantage for my family and how I'm going to provide for them, right? And a lot of people, at least the guys in the blue collar world that I live in, they bring it home and they have that idea of being strong men that have to be strong all the time and what that means in a conversation. And it's not honest. They're not showing their fears. So being a partner in a stoic relationship it's so much conversation. It's all it is. It's all conversation. It's all conversation. It's communication all the time. There's it's just equality. It's equality in conversation, really. And then the fatherhood part of it is just showing him how to be the best person for everybody else. I'd say all I do is to my father or to my son, as a father, is tell him to breathe and walk away. That's all I do. That's my stoic advice to my son.
Okay. There's just, again, so much to talk about here. So I guess getting back to, like, let's say, for example, you're talking about like, let's say, being a good partner, being a good father. So what about somebody who, let's say, is not in that position? They don't feel connected, particularly to any individual. They feel maybe almost an individual, like overly individualistic or lonely, alone, whatever. And they don't have a sense of community, and maybe they're afraid to go out. Maybe they've got trauma, whatever it is. They feel insecure. How do you, kind of help them find the courage to go out there, make themselves vulnerable? Being honest to yourself, especially, is one of the most vulnerable things that you can do. Scariest things. How do you encourage someone to, to step up like that and really, just put themselves out there?
Yeah, I've done the best by showing examples of what not to do. By showing myself when I was unhappy and showing other examples of people that live selfish lives. That's the name of the game when it comes to trying to get men to understand how to be the best version of themselves and not being selfish. So I sell a lot of stories about people that are selfish and look how they don't end up happy. And one of the best stories that I have is my time as a probate lawyer. That's one of the things that showed me that at the end of your life, what does the end of your life really look like? And I was surrounded by people dying. And I recognized the people that end life happiest are the ones that are giving everything they have to others, their efforts, their energies, their money, everything. And the people that are most miserable are the selfish people that are trying to hold on to things for themselves. And I talk about ego and selfish all the time to men because I go, if you're not going to submit to that idea that you have to get rid of ego, that ego is your number one enemy. I have a tattooed on my arm. It is your ego has to be your number one enemy if you're ever going to find happiness. So it's selling him the idea that, and it's as simple as, are you happy now? Are you happy right now? And I guarantee you're not, because you're chasing your ego. You're chasing selfish desires. And you have to flip that thinking on its head and say, I know it's a little weird. You have to do this motivated by the idea that you're doing it for them. You want to make them happy. You're trying to alleviate their burdens. And again, it's a visceral thing, because once you do it, it feels good. You go, okay, keep doing that. It's a self-perpetuating force. And the easiest thing to do is get people to do it. Once you get people to do some charitable acts and they write about it and say, yes, this felt good, and you go, okay, that's what you keep doing. Now you need to understand and submit that if you do it the other way again, you're going to be miserable. So that's the success I found in that realm.
Well, I was going to ask you, because you said that when your wife, this goes back to something very specific, when she started journaling, when you got her to, you said sort of like it seemed almost organically that through the process, you said, I think that she was evincing stoicism. Like, I forget how you framed it, but like, what about it? Was it just, sort of like writing about virtue, or like, what was it that really, said to you, this is the path that we're on?
So when it came to my wife in her journaling, it was a pretty hard sell. I'm not going to lie to you. When I first brought journaling up to her, it was because I had talked to my therapist. There were, I think at that point, 3 people in the world that knew I was a Stoic, my therapist being one of them. And I was sharing with her about my journal. And then that's when we decided I needed to share it with my wife. And we had this conversation, and I formed it in a way of, hey, I'm pretty much calling my wife out for postpartum at that point, right? But I tried to form it in a way of, hey, this is something that I do that I recognize that I think we need to talk about. And just in us talking about the journal, she was like, wait, what? You've been writing every morning for 2 or 3 years? What? And we just started talking about the process. And I said, yeah, this is essentially this is my medicine. Every day I've got to wake up and take this to kind of renew my license of me and how I deal with my day. And I think her first response is, well, I kind of do that. And I go, what do you mean you kind of do that? She goes, well, I collect my thoughts in a way on the way to work. And I go, that was what I thought journaling was too. But why don't you do it? Why don't you go ahead and we'll start this process? And I think that was like the entire conversation before we even got to the postpartum stuff and what I had identified. She was like, yeah, I want to do that too. So I want to be a part of that with you. I want, see, like, we're a team, you're doing it. I want to do it too. And then it became like, that was like the excitement. And then it became 6 months of me sitting back going, no, that is not how. Because I recognized when I was first journaling, it took me a long time to figure out how I was going to get the benefit out of the process. Besides I think the inherent benefits you get of writing, I was handwriting all of my journals. I think that is so much better than typing or writing dictating. But for her, once she got into the writing portion of it, it was just daily pounding for me of stoicism and virtues. I think she finally kind of like saw the light and came to it. And she's like, okay, I recognize this is hard, but I see the benefit. I know where you want to go, and I'm coming along with you. And it was a long sell, honestly, because she recognized she didn't understand it. And I made her kind of go through the same course that I went through of reading Enchiridion and meditations and all of Seneca's letters. And she sat in on my meetings. And it's, like I said, to understand the entire process of stoicism and philosophy, But the basis of cynicism is difficult for a lot of people to understand and take in. But she did it, but it was not easy. Again, it's probably a good year and a half, 2 years of getting through all those materials and us sitting down and talking about it for long enough for her to be able to have a conversation with somebody about Stoicism too. But again, the journaling portion, it was a day. It was literally a 15-minute conversation. She was like, that resonates. Of course I would do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, I mean, one thing that people who are seeking help, seeking to better themselves, unfortunately, a lot of people have a hard time, taking the long route. Okay, you're describing a long, arduous journey. Maybe it's not actually that arduous, in fact, but I mean, it is long. So, how do you sell somebody on that? Like step by step, day at a time. Like, how do you get them on board?
Yeah, the same way I just tell that story is, within the first 15 minutes, my wife was sold on it. It took me 2 years to sell Stoicism, and I'm not trying to sell anybody on Stoicism. This is what I tell people. That's my flavor of the cardinal virtues. Wherever you're going to settle in this life, you might want to get close to the cardinal virtues, right? Courage, justice, wisdom, temperance. And if you can follow your life in that way, in that fashion, you're going to be the happiest. We've gone through 2,500 years of this experiment of civilization, and those 4 virtues seem to be the ones that everybody's tacked onto, going, hey, if you can follow these, you're going to find the happiness. And what I found inside those virtues is hardest for everybody is dealing with your ego, saying we have all these wonderful things out in life that we can experience, and these pleasures and these comforts. I want those rather than virtue, which is, again, giving most of your energy to others. So Stoicism for me was a flavor of those cardinal virtues that I like the best. That's what resonated with me. Go find it somewhere else. Go to Islam. Go to Judaism. Go to Christianity. Go to Eastern philosophy. Go to Western philosophy. They're all over the place. Go find your flavor. Literally go and hang out with the people that smell that you like, that sound like you like, that look like you like. Just wrap it up in cardinal virtue and you're going to be fine. But the journaling portion of it is easy to sell. So yeah, if you want to change your life around, go find your flavor cardinal virtue. But if you want to get into them and find the immediate alleviation of anxiety, the immediate alleviation of all of those dumb monkey brain thoughts you have, go write them down. Spend 15 minutes with yourself every morning at a piece of paper, and you're going to find your truth. And burn it afterwards. It doesn't matter what you do. I would offer that you probably be best to review it. But again, it's the process of having the conversation with yourself, that honest conversation that you may not be able to do with anybody else. That not even when you're in your own head. But if you can do it on paper, you're going to find benefit there. But if you can continue beyond just the writing, get towards, again, that virtue portion of it, I think you find the best benefit.
Okay. Well, just because of time, Malini, I know. So, Eric, we always put, when we have guests on, we put their information in the description so they can access these things. And again, I really think it's important for people to at least look at, your journaling method. Once again, to realize it's not just about just writing out your thoughts haphazardly. There is a system. There are these points in place that, if you follow along, or if you're focusing on these areas, it will produce, the most, let's say, the maximal benefits in line with what you're describing. Is there something, again, just as a one last selling point, is there something you want to say about your specific way of journaling that you say this is why it's so powerful or effective?
This way is going to be powerful, effective, again, for people that are at that point where they need to. If you don't have a role model, I think that's the best thing to say. If you don't have somebody you can talk to every day that you know is going to be there, that you can call on the phone, use this journal. This is the one thing that's going to keep you in line for every area of your life. I never had anybody that could pick up the phone and say, hey, is this how I'm supposed to spend my money? Is this how I'm supposed to talk to my friends? Is this how I'm supposed to go to the gym and work out? This is for people that don't want to talk to money, that don't like talking to people, that may not have anybody they can talk to. This is it for them. And I know it's not everybody. I mean, it's going to be a very, very small percentage of people. This is for those people that need that overreaching kind of look at their life. And I hope you'll find it.
Okay. One more thing, because we were talking about maleness and we're talking mental health. And earlier on, Eric, when you were talking about kind of, let's say, your darker days, the more selfish days, you did use the word narcissism or narcissistic. You said you were narcissistic. Now, Malini and I have talked about narcissism, whether it's being narcissistic or narcissistic personality disorder. And, it's really hard to get someone to shift from that very self-focused, narcissistic side to what you're describing, which is literally the opposite of that, giving toward others and so on. Again, and we know what your process is, but when you did use the word narcissistic, were you being like literal, or were you saying more about that self-absorbed, self-focused, not caring about others? Like,
Yeah, no, not actual like narcissistic personality disorder. That I have empathy, unfortunately, for anybody that has called me a narcissist. But I will say that I think so many people, especially men, can exhibit a lot of narcissistic tendencies that look like narcissistic personality disorder. They're so wrapped up in selfishness. And again, I see the same thing with a lot of other men, and they're just protecting their own happiness. It's just they don't understand that their happiness has to change. If they're ever going to experience fulfillment themselves, the happiness has to be the joy of giving their efforts to others. And that's a hard sell for people that are protecting their own selfish tendencies for so long, saying, I'm going to find the drugs, the external pleasures, the objectification of women, whatever it is they're doing to find happiness in that. To change that mindset, say, okay, now you got to be charitable to others. It's hard, but it's a breaking down of it. And again, once you feel it, once you step away and experience the joy and restraint is what I go through now. Instead of, waking up and putting booze in my coffee in the morning, I wake up and I put creamer in my coffee, and it's the joy of restraint there on knowing that I'm going to be sober going forward for everybody else. And once you can feel it, once they can do it, once they do that a couple of times, they keep doing it, that's the changing momentum. And then they start to get friends that are nice to them genuinely. And there is a compersion aspect to understanding that it's not competition when somebody does good. Because that's the other thing too, is when there's a street mentality that if somebody does good, you look and go, oh, you're stealing my wealth, right? Like that was my change. You stole mine. It comes, no, I'm happy for you because when you succeed, we all succeed.
And I think you're the first person to use the term. And I think Malini and I may have talked about this word in a previous episode. You used compersion in a non-polyamorous context. But I think it's such an important concept. So for those who don't know, compersion is being happy for other people's well-being or success, as opposed to being envious or jealous of it. So yeah, embracing the compersion, being happy for others when they do well, and and using that as motivation. If they can do it, so can I. Not they're so lucky that they got it, or they got the breaks that I didn't get. It's more like, no, they did it. I want to build off of that. I want to enjoy. I want to join in their joy, and I want to, again, I want to use that to propel myself, and then I can do right by others as well.
Yeah, exactly. And inside the toxic beneficiary, it's funny because I for 35 years of my life, would walk around and see every other man around me is just either an enemy or competition, and it was, you're not at all going to be my friend. I have to protect me, and you're a threat to me in whatever shape or form. And you're absolutely right. And now I'm in a sphere in my professional life where it's like that. It's love begets love. And if you're successful, I'm successful. If business for you is business for me. We don't have to be greedy. We don't have to be bad. We're good business people, and everybody's going to do fine. But when you have that mentality of needing to protect your own happiness, and it's so misguided, it becomes just, you look evil to everybody else. You just look like a selfish, evil person only out for yourself. And I can look at those men and go, no, I understand exactly, because when I was in it, I was going, I'm a good guy. What are you talking about? I'm a really good guy. I look out for everybody around me. I'm not trying to steal anything. I'm not trying to do anything illegal. I'm just trying to protect what's mine. And it was just misguided because what was mine was my own selfish pleasures, right? And that conversion aspect to it now is you get to have a genuine positive emotion when somebody succeeds and you see somebody post something, instead of having that reaction of like, oh God, okay. It's like, heck yeah. Like I see your hard work and that's motivating me to keep doing hard work. It continues that beautiful cycle of wanting to do good versus going backwards and saying, oh, like you said, we're stealing mine, or you got yours, but where's mine, waiting for it rather than actually doing something. And here's the other thing is having conversations with people is amazing. You learn things every day, just talking to people and making those connections. And when you don't do that, you self-isolate because nobody wants to fight with anybody because you see everybody else's enemies. And instead, you can open up your door and see a bunch of friends instead of enemies.
Yeah. So we close this podcast with kind of summarizing what we talked about, because we've covered so many different topics here, but we like to give our listeners something that they can start with or what they can do with all this information. And in reading I can't remember which of the two books it was, but one of them you were, and you just mentioned it as well, The Joy of Exercising Restraint. I feel like that could be a whole conversation in and of itself. But from my view, what people could do as a starting point would be picking one area of their life where they could exercise some restraint and garner some joy from that. But for you, what would be a good starting point for people to take away from our conversation?
Write every morning. Just get up and write. That should be the first thing everybody should do. I wish in the military they changed their training protocols to, I don't know what they're doing these days, but get up and spend 15 minutes writing. It is the best way, I think, to start your day, to set your mindset. What I say, to renew the license to be yourself. We have to take action. You can't just go through the day and can't just go through the motion. Get up and just write, and do it as a family. Do it with your friends. This isn't a covert activity, right? There's no stigma to it. This is get up and share it with people. If you want to burn it, burn it. If you want to share it with your spouse or your partner, share it. But the most important thing is that you're having that honest conversation in a way that is in a safe space that you can do it yourself. Just right.
Okay, and just to sort of touch back on something, I mean, this is sort of the whole theme. And Mal, I think I've talked about this before, but I put a lot of emphasis on narrative, on self-narrative. I mean, that's what we are. We're the only creature, or one of the few creatures on the planet that our existence is based not just on the supposed objective reality, but the narrative that we create about our experience, about the world around us, our relationships and so on. So again, there's something about journaling, about taking that narrative and putting it down and seeing it, not just spitting it out there where it can just dissipate, but it lands in concrete, black and white, and you actually see your thoughts, right? You're not just spitting them out there. So I think that's for those who aren't really big on journaling or think it's cheesy or something like that, it's again, there's something to it. You are concretizing the narrative that's going on up here, and you're allowing yourself to see it, and that allows for reflection, and reflection is part of the self-honesty, and it's a virtue. So
yeah.
Right.
100%.
So where can our listeners find you, find your journal, find your books?
Yeah, so the honestyexperiment.com, that is going to be where I'm going to be at for a little bit now. You can download the Honesty Experiment kind of journaling guide. That is the original dozen that I had. You can download that for free. You can get my book there as well, Ruthless, and I'm all over social media. And you'll find some links there. Like I said, this is my Sunday. I have Sunday morning meetings, and then I have meetings during Tuesday and Friday as well.
And again, we'll put that all in the description so people can access it easily. So I guess on that positive note, everyone, until next time, keep your eyes on the road and your hands upon the wheel.